The year 2025 marked a pivotal turning point for Canada, a nation long known for its diplomacy and strong international relationships. In an unexpected twist, Canada's identity and sovereignty were publicly challenged by its closest ally and neighbor, the United States, putting decades of trust to the test. The once stable partnership was shaken by aggressive trade tactics and inflammatory rhetoric coming from Washington. These actions sent shockwaves through both governments, raising serious doubts about Canada's independence and its ability to chart its own course. What began as a seemingly routine trade dispute quickly escalated into a full-blown crisis of national pride. Canadians from coast to coast were forced to confront the reality of a more confrontational American posture, sparking passionate debates in homes, workplaces, and the halls of government. Under the leadership of new Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada faced pointed questions about its autonomy on the world stage. The government responded with unity and resolve, determined to protect the nation's interests and values. This story explores how Canada's leaders, from all corners of the political spectrum, put aside their differences and stood together to defend the nation's sovereignty and unique identity, showing remarkable solidarity in the face of adversity. The events of 2025 became a defining chapter in Canadian history, proving that while Canada and the U.S. are deeply linked by geography and history, there are fundamental lines that cannot be crossed without consequence. Canada's response sent a clear and unwavering message to the world. It is a proud, sovereign nation, united in its values, and that will never be forgotten, no matter the challenge. Tensions peaked when Pete Hoekstra, President Trump's pick for U.S. ambassador to Canada, downplayed Trump's 51st state comments as mere humor. Hoekstra's attempt to brush off the remarks as a joke did little to calm the growing unease. Instead, it seemed to confirm suspicions that the U.S. administration viewed Canada as less than an equal partner, fueling a sense of disrespect that had been simmering for months. Canadians found this dismissive, especially as Hoekstra's vague remarks about trade talks suggested Canada's fate was subject to whims, not respect or facts. Across the country, people questioned whether their voices and interests were truly being heard in Washington, or if they were simply being sidelined in critical negotiations. His comments, both in Washington and on CBC, were seen as part of a broader pattern of disrespect from the Trump administration. Many Canadians felt that their country's long-standing alliance with the U.S. was being taken for granted, and that their concerns were being minimized on the world stage. The implication that Canada was a subordinate, not a partner, struck a nerve nationwide. It wasn't just about trade or politics, it was about national pride and the right to be treated as an equal. Editorials and radio shows erupted with indignation, as ordinary Canadians felt patronized and their independence questioned. The media quickly picked up on the public's outrage, amplifying the debate and demanding accountability from both sides of the border. The ambassador's tone offended not just politicians, but citizens proud of their country's history and autonomy. From coast to coast, Canadians rallied together, determined to defend their sovereignty and remind the world of their nation's strength. This public outcry put immense pressure on Ottawa to respond forcefully. Lawmakers faced mounting calls to stand up for Canada's dignity and push back against any hint of condescension. The government could no longer rely on diplomatic niceties. It had to defend the nation's honor. Behind closed doors, officials debated how best to assert Canada's position without escalating tensions further. The stage was set for a powerful assertion of Canadian sovereignty, as the country prepared to show the world that it would not be overshadowed or dismissed. Prime Minister Mark Carney, newly in office, responded to the crisis with clarity and resolve. He directly rejected Trump's 51st state rhetoric, declaring, "America is not Canada, and Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form." Carney used Canada's economic leverage, warning Washington that continued hostility would reduce Canadian investment in the U.S. He reframed the narrative. Canada was not dependent, but mutually interdependent with its neighbor. Carney's plain, powerful language reassured Canadians that their leader would not back down. By focusing on sovereignty and economic realities, he projected calm strength and unity. His stance galvanized the nation, transforming anxiety into defiance. Canadians saw their leader fighting for their identity, not just their economy. Carney's leadership anchored the country during uncertainty, making the crisis a test of national character. The message was clear: Canada's independence was non-negotiable. The crisis erupted against the backdrop of a heated trade war, as President Trump imposed a sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods, sending shockwaves through the continent. The move was sudden and aggressive, catching many by surprise and immediately straining relationships between the neighboring countries. Billions in cross-border trade were threatened overnight, and Trump's threats of further escalation destabilized the North American economy. Businesses on both sides of the border faced uncertainty, with investors and workers alike bracing for the fallout. The sense of unpredictability grew as markets reacted and companies scrambled to adapt. Trump's public musings about annexing Canada and dismissing the border as artificial were seen as a direct attack on Canadian sovereignty. His rhetoric was not just political theater, it stoked real fears about the future of Canada's independence and its relationship with the United States. Former Prime Minister Trudeau warned that Trump's intentions were serious, accusing him of trying to collapse Canada's economy for political gain. Trudeau's government responded with urgency, rallying political leaders and business groups to defend Canadian interests. The tariffs disrupted supply chains, threatened jobs, and raised prices, with Canada bearing the brunt. Factories slowed production, small businesses struggled to stay afloat, and families felt the pinch at the checkout line. In response, Canada retaliated with its own tariffs, one of the few countries to do so. The government targeted American goods, sending a clear message that Canada would not back down without a fight. This act of defiance prompted further escalation from Washington, as the White House doubled down on its hardline stance and threatened even more severe measures. For Canada, the fight was about more than economics. It was about respect, dignity, and survival. Across the country, citizens rallied together, determined to defend their way of life and national identity. The 51st state rhetoric and economic aggression were seen as attempts to bully Canada into submission, fueling a wave of patriotism and resistance. The trade war became a defining test of Canada's resolve, uniting political parties and communities in a rare show of solidarity. The stage was set for a unified national response, as Canadians from all walks of life stood together in the face of adversity. Canada would not be intimidated. The nation's leaders and citizens alike resolved to stand firm, no matter the cost. The crisis demanded unity and strength, forging a renewed sense of purpose and national pride across the country. Prime Minister Carney was joined by leaders from all parties and provinces in a rare show of unity. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, often a political rival, unequivocally rejected Trump's rhetoric, declaring, "Canada is not for sale and will never be the 51st state." Ford threatened economic retaliation, reminding the U.S. of the deep integration between the two economies. Cabinet Ministers Anita Anand and François-Philippe Champagne worked tirelessly to build alliances, including with Mexico, to counter U.S. tariffs. This united front sent a clear message: Canadian sovereignty was not a partisan issue, but a national one. The American administration could not divide Canadian leaders. Canadians were reassured that their government would defend the country's independence on the world stage. Looming over the dispute was the 2026 review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. For Trump, it was leverage. For Canada, a high-stakes negotiation that would shape the continent's future. Carney's government adopted a patient, strategic approach, refusing to be rushed into a bad deal. Behind the scenes, Canada coordinated with Mexico to present a united front. The goal: prevent the U.S. from playing its neighbors against each other. The USMCA review became a symbol of Canada's fight for a rules-based order and mutual respect. Carney's principled stand reassured Canadians that their government would not be bullied at the negotiating table. As tensions with the U.S. grew, Canada deepened its partnership with Mexico. In August 2025, Canadian ministers met with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to coordinate strategy. When Mexico secured a temporary pause on new tariffs, Canada was left out, highlighting the complexity of its relationship with the U.S. Still, Canada and Mexico worked to strengthen their alliance and reduce dependence on Washington. This collaboration reinforced that USMCA was a three-country agreement, not a US-centric one. Canada's partnership with Mexico became a key element in rebalancing North American power. The events of 2025 struck at the core of Canadian identity. Living beside a superpower, Canada has always fought to build a distinct society and protect its sovereignty. Trump's 51st state comments were seen as a direct assault on this hard-won independence. Canadians rallied to defend their values: universal healthcare, gun control, multiculturalism, and their right to self-determination. The tariff war made clear that economic independence is essential to political autonomy. Standing up to U.S. pressure became a collective declaration. Canada would not trade its sovereignty for convenience. Leaders like Carney and Ford gave voice to a national sentiment of pride and resilience. The crisis reaffirmed that Canada is and will always be a proud, independent nation. The turmoil of 2025 tested Canada's resolve and forced a powerful reaffirmation of its sovereignty. Under Carney's leadership, Canada responded with unity and principle, not aggression. The government's clear stance reassured Canadians and demonstrated that the country would not bow to intimidation. Strategic moves in trade negotiations and alliances with Mexico showed foresight and strength. The crisis redefined the Canada-US relationship, making clear that partnership must be based on mutual respect. Canada emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The message was unmistakable. Canada is master of its own fate, today and always.